I always tell people that what distinguishes Silicon Valley is not its successes, but the way in which it deals with failure. We live in an industry, the innovation industry, and we live in a place, Silicon Valley, that operates much like the earn-run averages for batters in the major leagues. They're going to strike out more than they hit home runs, and they're going to hit less than 500. That's the deal. That's the deal in the Valley. We're going to hit less than 500. It's by definition the case. This is about experimentation. This is about, innovation is about taking risks to do things that haven't been done before. If you could do them with a level of certainty that would increase the odds above 50%, we wouldn't need Silicon Valley. Big companies would do it, and they do it well. The reason big companies don't venture into what Silicon Valley does is because their business models do not tolerate the level of failure required for innovation. The only business model, solid business model, that has been created to deal with failure and still make substantial amounts of money, so substantial that they're able to continually invest in failure, reaping the few successes they can, is the venture capital model. It's a portfolio model, big returns on winners, and a lot of losses. So we live in a world of risk, and we live in a world of failure, and the real issue is how do we deal with that failure? When I travel around and look at the Silicon Valleys of other places in the world, one of the distinguishing factors, as you look at them, is certainly not the infrastructure. You know, they've got cubicles, they've got, they've got broadband, they've got lawyers, they've got accountants. You go to India and you walk into Wipro Infosys offices and you swear you're here in Silicon Valley. What generally is lacking is a culture of constructive failure. Constructive failure. The ability to tolerate failure, proceed with your career, and do it again, and take your experience and cash in on it as an asset. Still many business cultures where when you fail, you're finished. And that includes Western Europe. I find that probably the most entrepreneurial cultures with regard to innovation and failure are the United States and China. Chinese are natural, absolutely natural entrepreneurs. More so than India in a sense of being able to take risk and fail. And so the culture of failure and constructive failure is what defines this place. I've lived it. I've had plenty of failures. If you sort of tally up everything I've done and you actually take a look at the money made, not just the outcomes, because a lot of these outcomes are what I call horizontal outcomes, meaning that we didn't succeed, we sold it. We gave it away. We merged it. It survived, but nobody made a bunch of money. But when you take a look at all of that, I've had some screaming financial failures. Go was a huge financial failure for the time. When I tell you the amount of money we lost, it's going to seem paltry, especially compared to things like Webvan, which basically left a $1 billion crater in the valley. But we left about a $75 million crater in the valley, and that was